Have you ever lost anything? Your mind. Okay. We're going all the way there. Very great. Okay. I was thinking keys, but yeah. Yes, we've all lost those things that'll just make us crazy, right? Like, are you the kind of person where you put it right there? Like someone precious on the show choir. That's where my brain has been for the last few weeks. On the praise team, probably don't remember that their keys are up here on the altar right now. But it's okay. They have a tile and they're going to be able to go home today, right? Because we have this whole industry that helps us find our lost things because we so regularly lose the things. Cliff lost his keys. This has been a few months back. Now, Cliff losing his keys, that's like a weekly event. That's not a big deal. But he really had lost his keys this time. It wasn't the kind of thing where, sorry guys, but this is really kind of how it works, where it's like, he's like, I can't find my keys anywhere. And I'm like, go look on the altar table, look at the altar table, stand right in the middle, reach your right hand out as far as it'll reach down, and that's where your keys will be. He's like, I already looked there, but of course that's where they are. No, this was like really lost. Like I looked in all the places too. We double, triple, quadruple checked all the places. So we had been to a cross-country meet that day up in Clinton. And we had stopped multiple places along the way for various things and gotten in and out of the car. And so it was like, so the problem was he was driving my car with my keys. Yeah. So when it came time to find his keys, he was like, I don't know. I didn't need them. I didn't use them, but I had them with me, so I can't remember. We called gas stations. We called restaurants. We looked, we called the director or the leader, the head person over cross country in Mississippi. If you're mowing the cross country field and you mow over keys, just let us know so that we can go to bed, and stop looking for these keys. We did, we finally washed all the laundry. It just wasn't anywhere. And it wasn't just the car key, right? Like it was the car key and the house key and the work key and the post office key and the little key that he uses to unlock the box to change the air in the church. Like it was all the keys, And of course our car keys anymore, you can't just run to Walmart and get keys. Like you have to take out a loan, right, to get the new car key. So it was so he was stranded, and so for days I'm like carting him around because he can't find his keys. So it was like, we have got to find these keys. So he asks Facebook. I don't know, because maybe Facebook knows where the keys are, Well, so Facebook starts telling us all these stories about where the keys. Have you checked the freezer? Okay, we'll go check the freezer for the keys. Like people just started sharing all the crazy places that the keys got dropped. But those keys, they were nowhere. So finally we paid the money to get all the keys remade. We made double copies now of all the keys and put the other keys in the places so that if this happens again, I know we finally did it. She's applauding for us. So but we didn't find the other keys. And they just went where lost things go. I don't know where the lost things go. They just were there. Months go by. And I reached down into the little thing in the door, the kind of never region, not the one that things fall down where in the center console. We knew to look there in that nether region, the other one on the door. But we had looked there. I promise you, we would not have not looked there. But there, my eyeglasses case was there. And inside my eyeglasses case was the spray that I used to clean my eyeglasses and a cloth that you would use then to wipe them out. All there. And I reach in there and I pull it out and I spray and I put it down. And I reach in there and I pull it out and I spray and I put it down. And I reach in there and I pull it out. What is that? in the eyeglasses case, under the lens spray, in the little pocket by the door, are the keys. And I really didn't know if I should tell him or not. So I have the keys, and I'm like, what kind of day you having? Have you ever lost anything? Yeah. But we lose more serious things than that, don't we? Yeah. Sometimes we lose jobs. Sometimes we lose competitions that we worked really hard for. And that hurts. Sometimes we lose opportunities. Sometimes we lose relationships. Sometimes we lose people that we love. Sometimes we lose really important things. So today I want to talk about a very common human experience of lost things. Luke introduces this story, and it's a story particular to Luke. And I guess that's probably because Luke, being an outsider, a Greek guy in a Jewish world, might have felt at one point in time like one of those lost things. And it's almost with great glorious, like one of those sarcastic statements that you're like, oh, that was funny, that he introduces his story, right? Jesus was known to hang out with notorious sinners. Like, doesn't that just sound wonderfully scandalous? Notorious sinners. And as Christina emphasized for us, he would even eat with them. Heavens above. And it made the religious people angry. And so knowing their frustration, knowing their disappointment, and knowing that he wanted them to understand what he was up to, he said, let me tell you a series of stories. A story about lost things. Now, I want you to recall that as we are going through these stories of Jesus during our Lenten season, we're going to shape them around 3 questions for ourselves. Those questions are, do I have everything I need to do ministry? Do I know how to find what I lack in order to complete ministry? And then to switch those words and really kind of mess with us, do I need everything I have in order to do ministry? So those are the questions, again, that I want you to be prayerfully considering every week, but framing these stories around as you hear what probably are fairly familiar stories, again told for who we are today. Now, this parable has been taught, how many, probably millions of times through the history of the church. But one of my favorite teachers of this story is a woman named Christine Caine. She is a feisty Australian preacher out of Hillsong Church. And if you can imagine a woman about my size with a very thick Aussie accent, she tells the story of these lost things in a way that nobody can really just match or touch. And so I want to share some of these words with you. If you really like these words, you can find them on lots of YouTube videos, but particularly in her book called Undaunted. She speaks of her own testimony of being lost and found in the context of Luke 15. And she writes, God is obsessed with the lost. Christians ought to be lostologists, but we are dysfunctional. And especially when it comes to the lost, we are dysfunctional. But the truth is, nobody ought to understand the lost like the church, because we are particularly a group of lost and found people. But we don't. So Jesus says to the people he has gathered, let me make this simple for you. Let me break it down. I'm going to tell you 3 stories. I don't want you to judge the lost. I don't want you to condemn the lost. and I don't want you to point a finger at the lost, and I definitely don't want you to hate the lost. Because I'm going to explain to you how people get lost. I'm going to make it really simple. This is Christine writing this. She says, there's a woman, there's a coin, there's a sheep, and there's some men. All right? That's what we got. And you know the parable as well as me. She writes, so you could be driving down the street and there's this little sheep and there's this whole paddock over here and it's full of sheep, lots of sheep in this paddock. And then you go over here to this one and there's this one little sheep all by itself. And so you go to the one sheep all by itself and you say, what happened? And that little sheep, it's had its head down all day long just eating grass. And it looks up and it says, oh no, I'm lost. And she asks, was this a scary, demonic, evil sheep? No, it's just a sheep that was preoccupied with eating and it got distracted and it was so preoccupied at the end of the day that it ended up lost. And we have a whole generation, she says. I'm thinking maybe 2 or 3 generations that are so preoccupied with just paying the bills. With just paying student loans, with just getting the assignments done, with just trying to keep their marriage together, with just trying to keep their kids off drugs, with just trying to keep body and soul and mind together, that somehow they're just trying to get through this thing called life and they are preoccupied. And they end up lost. And then Jesus goes on and he says, there's this woman and she has a coin and it gets lost. And so the question is, did that coin get itself lost? No, of course not. The woman was careless with the coin. And the coin ended up lost. And we have a generation. And whether we wanted to blame the media, or we want to blame the government, or we want to blame the education system, or we want to blame parenting, the fact is, we, the church, we have taken vows and we have been given stewardship over a generation that has ended up lost. And we have generations of families in the ditches of life because people have been careless and they've ended up lost. And they don't need you and me pointing a finger of judgment or animosity or hatred, because Jesus said, I did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through me. And Christine concludes this section by saying, I, Christine, ended up lost. Not because I was some big demonic person, but because the people that had been given stewardship over my life weren't good stewards. And I was left abandoned and unnamed and unwanted in a hospital. She writes, I was sexually abused by many different men several times a week, consistently for 12 years. People were careless with my life, and I ended up lost. She wants to know, what are we going to do about it? And Jesus wants us to consider what we might do about it. The sheep, the coins, and then the story that culture knows so well that it uses images from it without even knowing necessarily that it's referring to one of the most powerful salvation stories in our corpus of writing and literature. We talk about the prodigal son. We talk about the fatted calf. And you know this story. And really, it's not just about one son, is it? There's 2 sons and a dad. And both of those boys end up lost. The older brother is lost in bitterness, and the younger brother is lost in self-indulgence, and they both nearly lose each other and their dad because of their selfishness. Now, what the younger brother did cannot be underestimated. Luke tells us that he goes to his father and he asks for his share of the inheritance. We need to imagine a young man somewhere between the ages of 16 and 25 years old coming to his dad and saying, "Give me my share of the inheritance." Now, as offensive as that might sound to you and I in our ears today, to them, that would have been horrifying, because basically he's looking at his dad and saying, "I wish you were dead. I don't want to wait for you to croak, old man. I want my money now." At least that's how it would have sounded to the servant who had helped raise that boy. It's how it would have sounded to his older brother. And here's the thing, too. You see, it's not like people in that day and time were cash rich. They didn't take money places. They bartered for things. You traded one thing for another thing. And so when dad gives him his share of the inheritance, it's not like he just calls up the stockbroker and taps into the 401k and draws down a little money. He has to sell. Follow me here. He has to sell half his land to give that boy his share of the inheritance. The land that's sustaining them right now. Land that had been in his family for generations. Y'all, we've talked about these tribal lands. Generation upon generation belonging to this family. And this kid, in his audacity and rebellion, says, "I wish you were dead. Give me my share now." It cannot be underestimated what he did. And that dad does it. He cashes out, and about the time that that boy with that money loaded down in his bag or his pockets or whatever, new tenants would be moving onto the property. So you can understand why the older brother is bitter. That's the scene that Luke sets up for us. He was a rotten kid, and it was a rotten thing to do. And then he doesn't even do good stuff with the money. Like, if he had gone and cured cancer or something, that'd be great, but he doesn't. Luke tells us that he goes and spends it on careless living. And Luke kind of leaves it up to our imagination what that means. The older brother obviously takes that to the nth degree when he describes it later on in the story. But the fact is, he burns through the money, and he ends up destitute and slopping pigs, which is lower than low for a Jewish boy. It would have meant that he knew that he was unclean inside, outside, and up and down every side that he could know himself. But we can imagine that, because we've either received the postcards from the black sheep in our family, or we've written them ourselves. It is not an isolated story. We do rotten things to each other. We actually have had moments where we have looked at somebody else, and if we haven't said it, we've thought it. Get lost. I think that's probably what the older brother told that younger brother. Just get lost. And I don't think the father said that to the son, but I imagine that's exactly what that younger son meant when he said to his dad. I think in his mind at least, and his heart, he was thinking, "Get lost, old man." This is not a pretty scene. Jesus is not drawing a pretty picture. And so in stories 1 and 2, the one responsible for the losing does the searching, right? Because even though that little sheep was distracted, was it the sheep's responsibility to get all the sheep home at the end of the day? No, it was the shepherd's responsibility. So when the shepherd realized he was missing one, he goes in search. When the woman realizes that coin is lost, she doesn't fuss at the coin. She realizes she was careless and she goes in search of the coin. So what about our story about a son here? What about story number 3? Why does the father not go in search of his son? And I think it's because he was not responsible for his lostness. That boy was responsible for his lostness. He did it. He ran away. But Christine so gracefully points out in her book that our role in the church, regardless of whether it was carelessness or distraction or all-out full-on rebellion, that our role in the church is not to condemn the lost. Our condemnation does not help their lostness. So what does? What position do we take then as the church? You are actually asking excellent questions. That is the exact point of Jesus' story. Okay, so to our friends lost to carelessness, what would we say to those in the world who have been discarded by the world, who those called to steward them just didn't, and they are lost to carelessness? Well, the woman is rewarded, Luke says, when she makes a careful search. And so I want to know, are we in the church, are we making a careful search for the lost? She would have known that if she had just swept through her house with carelessness, that coin could have gotten more lost. Kicked under a piece of furniture and not found until she moved out years later, right? Lost in the cushion of a couch and sat on for the next 40 years. No, she's been careless to lose it, but she's not careless in her search. She makes a careful search. Last week I told you that there are 132,000 people living in Harrison County who do not have a church family. They are not in church this morning. That we don't even have to invite the people who go to other churches, because we've got 132,000 people in Harrison County who aren't going to church that we can invite to church with us on Sunday morning. So I did the research for Jackson County this week. And it turns out there are 90,000 people in Jackson County who aren't going to church, who don't have a faith community. Y'all, we're up to 220,000 people in just the lower 2 counties of the Gulf Coast who do not know the warmth and fellowship and love of a church family. We need to make a careful search. These are our neighbors, our co-workers. These are people we know. We need to make a careful search. Not to judge, not to criticize, not to condemn, to welcome, to invite, to befriend. But then we know the people that are lost to distraction. And undoubtedly, of the 220,000, I suspect this is the majority of the category. These are good people, as we would call them. They're just busy, you know? They're just paying the bills. They just got their head down. They're just working hard. And frankly, church seems like a burden. And they are distracted. And they have gotten lost. And Luke here makes several distinctions. He really goes into some detail here as he talks about how Jesus would leave the 99 to go after the one. And he says in one translation, and I think this is good, he says the 99 represent those who have no need of grace. They're too good for grace. The religious people who have it all together, they've got it figured out. And you know, I think that when you run into people who are like, I'm too good for grace, you can say, that's okay. Grace has better things to do. Like go and find lost people. But now, you are not too good for grace. I know that. I know that about you. And so then what? So Jesus says that there is this huge party that happens in heaven for the one who repents over against a gathering of 99 people who are too good for grace. Too big for their britches, you might say. But this one that repents, there's this party in heaven. And see, I think that Jesus has been at the party before. I think that Jesus can see the party as it's happening even when he's on earth. And I just think that our 220,000 friends, they've never seen the party. Because see, I think that if they could see the party, I think that if they could just one time see what it looks like to celebrate what it means to be found in Christ, they never miss another minute. But y'all, what if they've never seen the party? Because when they glance in, what they see are older, pouty, older brothers who are just grumpy and aggravated and mad. So here's what I want us to be creative, really us. You know, this is not just, you know, me making up a sermon. This is like me talking with you. How do we get creative? How do we throw the party? Aren't you excited about the grace that's come into your life? Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. How do we let that out for others so that the people that we know that don't know this are like, I want that. I'd rather have that than go to a Saints game. Hallelujah. I can't be bothered with a Saints game on Sunday. I got a party to go to. What if we shut down casinos because what we had was more exciting? Come on. I mean, do we believe that or not? And if we believe it, then how do we start doing that? How do we get creative and start doing that? Let's just start by agreeing with each other that we're not going to get distracted either. And this is Leanne's heart talking with yours. Because sometimes what happens, we don't mean to be a part of that 99 I'm too good for grace thing. I know we don't. I know you don't. I know you. But sometimes we get worried about our own grass. And sometimes we forget that the grass is green because the Lord has blessed it to be so that the lost sheep will want to come in and eat. But we get so worried about keeping the grass green and worried that somebody's going to tromp on our green grass that we don't invite them to come and do it. And we forget that it's for the purpose of their being filled by it that we even have green grass to begin with. We didn't make the grass. So let's just hold each other accountable that we're not going to be so worried about our green grass that we wouldn't give it all for the sake of the beloved. That we would never forget how good grace is. Because then we got to talk about those who are lost to rebellion. Luke says, when the young man finally came to his senses, he's done the despicable thing. He has behaved completely selfishly, completely rotten. I mean, he has just disappointed at every level, everyone that's important to him, including himself at this point in time. And he's in the worst possible way. And Luke writes, he came to his senses. So what we teach in Wesleyan theology is this thing called prevenient grace. And it's the confidence we have that the Holy Spirit of God goes before us and even reaches out to boys in pig slop, and even reaches out to women who are cast carelessly, and even reaches out to distracted moms and dads. This grace that goes before reaches out to this boy where he is. This grace that one day brought us to our senses and is going before those that we know that are lost and calling them to their senses. And so here's the question that helps us get at the brilliance of this story. What if that daddy had gone after that boy in the midst of his heyday and dragged him home? I don't think it would have worked. I think he was still so convinced of his rightness that he would have never been transformed by righteousness. I don't think he was ready to know the truth. But on the other hand, what if that daddy had gone and dragged that boy home out of the pig slop? I think that young man would have been so still covered in his shame that he would not have known the love of his father. And shame would have blocked all that love. Too ashamed. But the father in this story trusted grace. I don't know if there's a harder thing for a parent to do. But the father trusted, and I know he prayed. But he trusted grace. But then he did this. He made sure of his posture when the boy returned home. Right? He did not hold the posture of a condemning father. He held the posture of welcoming a son. Grace brought his son to his senses, and he found his way home. But then we move on in the story. And the older brother, he's not on the front porch with dad waiting for brother to come home. He is not. And he is, when we meet him again in the story, he is stirred up. I mean, we're talking hornet's nest. And we get it, don't we? I mean, it's obvious what has him so mad, and you can't blame him. He probably doesn't trust his brother. He probably is he's had to help his dad figure out how to put things back together because now they're living on half their income. They're dealing with these new tenants that are on. I mean, every morning would have been a new reminder of just the stupid thing that his little brother did. Like, yeah, it's deep. It's thick. He feels it. He probably knows more stuff on his brother than his dad even knows, right? Do I have any siblings in the room? That's right. I can tell you some stories. I know y'all are watching. I love you, and I'm not telling your stories. And I think that this older brother loves his dad. I'm going to give him that. I think he loves his dad, and he doesn't want his dad to suffer. But I think really the bottom line here is he hates his younger brother. And y'all, hate is just something that Jesus doesn't tolerate. He just doesn't have time for hate. Not when he's going to give his whole life for love. And that's just the long and short of it. And the father pleads with this older son. He says, please celebrate with me. My son was dead and he is alive again. Please celebrate with me. And again, I think that if the 220,000 out there could see the party in the Father's heart and could see the older brothers, because we're older, right? We got here first. We're older. If they could see our celebration, we'd be busting at the seams. Not just in our church, in every church along the Gulf Coast. So, do I have what I need for ministry? Well, I have the grace that saved me. I have my story. I know what it is to be lost, and I know how it feels to be found. And my story is my ministry. Do I know how to find what I lack in ministry? Well, now that's the whole point of this story. Is do I know how to find coins and sheep and the lost sons and daughters of the earth? Do I know how to make a careful search? Do I know how to abandon my green grass for their dry bones? Do I know how to have a party and draw them in? And then that question that I mean to be meddling in my own life at least. Do I need what I have in order to do ministry? So the father pleads with the son, the older son, please come and celebrate with me. And the son says, you never even killed a goat for me and my friends. And now, that reprobate, smelling like pig, comes waltzing home, and you kill the fatted calf. Please. Please. And of course, we're reading the story, we want to be like, exaggerate much? But here's what the dad says. And I want to imagine that they stand eye to eye, only the dad is a little bit stooped, right? Because he's just spent the last however long just bowed in prayer. And that older brother's got his chest just bowed out. And that dad reaches, and you know how you kind of pull right here at their tricep, right? To kind of hold them close. And he says, all that I have is yours. Okay, so lean in, church. Lean in here and hear the Father say, all that I have is yours. But I lost one of the two most precious things I have ever had. Would you celebrate with me? So what does God think of our jealousy? Because there's no other way to name that. The younger brother's getting something from dad that the older brother thinks he doesn't have. The definition of that is jealousy. So what does God think of our jealousy? Why would we who have received the Son and the Spirit, why would we ever question God's goodness toward us? How does God respond when we complain to God that someone who we obviously think doesn't deserve it has it better or easier or luckier than we do? Luke does not tell us what the older brothers do next. And I'm not going to answer that question because I think Jesus wants us to think about it. Almighty God, you have filled all things with your presence in our world. And so with some humility this morning, we come to you. And we ask that in your great love, you would keep us near to you today. Grant that in all our ways and in all our doing, we may remember that you see us. And that we would always have the grace to know and perceive the things that you want us to do and the strength to fulfill them. Jesus Christ, you who for our sake suffered, knew hunger and pain and homelessness even, and shame. We confess that we refuse to share that burden sometimes. And we have refused the burden of your cross, and we have denied you to others rather than face their mockery. And we have sought comfort and security rather than the way of the cross. Forgive us. Help us to make amends. And give us courage to endure. Oh, our good Father, we are so thankful for your wonderful graciousness toward us in past days. For the way that your providence has been over us and above us and around us and beneath us and held us in everlasting arms and in every experience of our life, we give thanks that we can turn to you now simply as a person turns to a friend. You are right there to share with you the thoughts of our hearts and the needs of our spirits, that we boldly approach the throne with our needs and we speak and you are closer than a whisper. We tell you the happiness that we enjoy in your strengthening presence. We are grateful for the thought of a future that is filled with hope and promise and strength because we know that you will never forsake us. And we give thanks for the wonder of a life that is filled with vitality and strength and confidence and enthusiasm and purpose and meaning and power because you have touched our lives and you have placed your spirit in us. And we know your presence. Lord, I ask that you would hear the prayers of every person gathered here. You know our needs. You alone can strengthen us in all that's good. You make the potential that's within us become real. And you alone know our selfishness, our carelessness, and our outright rebellion that makes our souls weep in secret places for sheer shame. And you alone can forgive. Make us strong, Jesus, in all that's good. Cleanse us from all that's evil. Teach us to walk the royal road of faith, where we confidently put our hand in yours and know that your leading is right, and we don't look back, but we keep moving forward because we can sing, "It is well with my soul." Bless our fellowship together this morning, Lord, especially this fellowship that we are about to have at your table. Help us to look at one another with eyes of understanding and love and appreciation because of our bond in Christ. We sing in our hearts, truly blessed is the tie that binds us in Christian love. Bless each home that's represented here. May these homes be places of worship and praise and joyous gratitude and partying for all of life's goodness in you. And Jesus, come quickly to save our world because we need more of you. We are particularly mindful to pray for people who have things that we often take for granted, like peace and freedom. We thank you for mercy. And we ask, and we make our confession in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.